So, welcome aboard. We're going to talk for a little while today on net operations. This came about as a result of one of the hurricanes. There was an evolution of networks that apparently nobody knew how to be a net control station, what the requirements were to be a member of a net, and they turned into kind of a, I won't use military terms. So, by the way, for any of you, I learned net operation with a clipboard at the back of my head when I made a mistake. I was trained in the Air Force back in about 1975, 76. And been kind of associated with communications all those years. Finally waited for code to go away because I can never memorize code. Finally got my amateur license like in 2012. But I was a commercial radio operator for 10 years. Then a military communicator for 20 years. Contractor for 20 years. Yeah, I know. Okay. I'm Dave Rockwell. I'm W4PXE. I'm the section traffic manager for the West Central Florida section. We developed this here. My partners in crime are listed above. First off, the reference material, a lot of it comes out of the ARRL operations manual, and then the EC01 course, which I recommend everybody take. Kenwood Strong, WC4FSU, was the North Florida section traffic manager. Dave Shepard, W2PAX South Florida section traffic manager, assistant developing this, and then a good friend of mine, Mike Drake from Pinellas County, he's their ACS Areas Training Officer. I reviewed it for content. Mike always finds every error I ever make, so that's why I send it to him. All right, today we're going to talk a little bit about net basic. We'll discuss briefly a free net. Then we'll talk about mostly directed nets. We'll talk about how you participate in a net, what net control duties are, functions of the net liaisons, because we're doing this in terms of a traffic net. Relay stations, the net manager duties and responsibilities. We'll go through some do's and don'ts. Talk a little bit about traffic. I'm not going to teach traffic handling here. I can't do that inside of an hour. And then I'll open it for questions. What is a net? It's a collection of stations communicating together and normally for a common purpose. There are two basic types of nets. There's a free net or an open net. Normally the communications are informal. It may or may not have a net control, depending on what frequency or organization you're working with. Most of us are going to deal with what are called directed nets. These are formal nets. And we'll talk a little bit more, some little finer granularity on directed nets here in a minute or so. These are stations that are communicating, first off, only with the net control station normally unless directed otherwise, and they are focused on a particular purpose. We have a number of formal nets and directed nets, traffic nets. How many here are familiar with the Florida phone traffic net? So you actually do get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I recommend it. It's on 3940. It's a very, very well run net. and it's good practice on HF. And they do actually send traffic still. You may have a resource net in support of, say, an emergency event, an incident set up by your county or your areas group. This is where you would be checking in, telling them you're available, finding out what requirements are, those types. We may have a tactical net. These are the people that are actually out responding. Generally speaking, communications on a tactical net are informal, but it is still a directed or controlled net. We may have an information net. A lot of the sections run Aries nets once a week or so, where they give you bulletins, tell you what vests are coming up, all those types of things. And during an incident, we may also set up health and welfare nets. These handle information about people impacted by the event. Normally on health and welfare, you only accept outgoing traffic from the disaster area for the first 72 hours. After that, then you can start processing. A lot of that responsibility today, if the internet is running, the Red Cross adopts it and they do basically internet reporting. No need to run health and welfare traffic. A lot of nets operate on the basis of a roll call. These are a particular set of stations that are called in order. The members have registered with the net manager. Many of our local nets are kind of a hybrid of a roll call net and a directed net, in that they will call by, say, the repeater, or they'll call by the county, or they'll call by the town. Those, not a specific roster of stations, but those are how they do it. A control net is, in strictest terms, is restrictive. It is there for a purpose and one purpose only. Best example is if your area is being impacted by a tornado. In my county, Pinellas County, we call that a condition black. The only information to be passed over that control map is information related to the tornado itself. No other basic information. Oftentimes your emergency management resource net that your areas or a RACES group is running is a control net. They're expecting you to check in only if you have specific information or you're saying you're specifically available, those types of things. Question on types of nets. All right. Basic thing. In a directed net, net control is in charge. All communication should be directed to and from net control unless you're otherwise directed by net control. Normally they have established what we call a protocol. That's a set of procedures for that net. That should be a published document that's available. Net managers provide instructions to the net control stations as to how they should run their net. Most of the time, the protocol is captured in what we call a net script that the net control station is going to read through the process of controlling the net. A script normally is composed of a preamble, A lot of times you'll hear somebody say, oh, I need the preamble. What they're actually saying is they need the script. Preamble is the introduction to the net, to what the instructions for the members of the net are. Then there will be a set of net procedures. These may or may not be read by the net control, but it's telling the net control how they will call on stations, how they will handle the information. And then there's always a net closing. That net closing may include a net report identifying the number of stations, the number of messages, how long the net was. All of that is part of protocol and procedures for the net. If you're going to participate in the net, you're going to hear one word from me about 5 times today. The first thing you need to do on a net is listen. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say when you check in necessarily. Listen to what the net control says. Listen to what the other stations are saying, because that makes the net roll more smoothly. It's a good idea before you actually sign into a net, listen to the net a few times. Get a feel for it. In the military, we call it an understanding of the battle rhythm. This is how it's going to evolve. Be ready when your station is called. Know what you're going to say. This doesn't cut it. Words that you should keep in mind: you speak clearly, concisely, and then close. Say only what needs to be said, say it as clearly as possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about those skills later on. When talking, please speak at a moderate speed. We're not giving medals for how fast you can say your call sign. If I'm in net control and I ask you for your call sign about 3 times, you read it to me too fast. I was unable to type all, but I use a net logger. And I won't keep at you until you give me your whole call. After about the 3rd or 4th time somebody figures out, oh, I need to slow down. We need to be clear and concise, not fast. Fast does not demonstrate skill on the radio. Fast represents skill if you're sending more. I'm impressed with 25 words a minute. I'm not impressed with people trying to read 50 words a minute on the net. I still many times use a pencil. Please use standard phonetics. I don't know how many times I have written down KW when somebody says kilowatt. Learn the connect with the phonetic alphabet. Another thing I learned with the clipboard in the back of my head. I had to be able to say it forward and backwards without a hesitation. I still can, almost. Avoid chit-chat and extensive niceties. If you're checking into the net, I don't need your medical conditions. I don't need to know that today is St. Patrick's Day and you're giving me an Irish blessing, okay? Some of that's okay. I mean, we are doing this as a hobby and we're doing it for fun. But all of that takes time on a net, especially if the net exists for a purpose. Take discussions like that off air. Okay, practice, practice, practice. I consider myself marginally capable as a net control. Any of you that are familiar with the West Central Florida National Traffic System net, what we call Icom net, I've been the net control on that net 482 times. I've just about broken in. The more you do this, the better you are and the more comfortable you are. You have to be careful though, because you can't get complacent. Good idea during the net to keep your own log, especially if stuff that's going on in the early phases of participating in that. It's good to do that. Don't wear out your welcome. If you need help, you can ask for help, but don't pester the net control every 5 minutes. How do I set the swatch on my radio? I have a Yaesu FT60R. Okay. Take that offline. We never correct a person's operations. We may correct the accuracy of information if what is presented is inaccurate. But we never correct an operator on the air. Take that off air. Send them a text, email, call him on the phone. 6 or 7 of you drive to his house. Whatever it takes, but don't correct people on the air. 1, it embarrasses them. 2, it takes time out of the net that gains nothing. And as always, we learned this in our life training. No derogatory comments, no expletives, no racial slurs. We just don't do that on the radio. There are some checkers that, yeah, some of that happens, but those aren't direct attacks. If you are a net control station, you are in charge of the net. We'll talk a little bit about a little problem with net managers in a few minutes, but you are responsible for the minute-by-minute operation of the net. Normally, the net control stations are appointed by whoever the net manager is. They generally follow the script, but a net control operator has some latitude to deviate from the script when the events so dictate. In a directed day, NCS controls all interactions. You don't call somebody else. You call them net control and ask them if you can talk to that person. Now sometimes you're sitting there on the net, you've been trying to talk to Bill for the last 2 weeks. He's not replying to your text. You called him on the radio and he didn't come up, but he checks into the net. If you insist on talking to Bill at that time, you would say, contact and your phone. Net control will, if they're willing to, will ask you, will give you your call your station direct. Now, if it's going to be a long conversation, first thing they have available is another frequency. take your conversation off net. That way you don't delay the net, and the rest of the net probably doesn't want to hear about what your spouse said about it. The NCS or a designated logging station should keep a complete log of the net, all the stations that check in, and if there's a lot of traffic going back and forth, or a lot of, whether it be formal or informal, you might make notes of some of that traffic. For noisy nets or nets with propagation issues, the NCS should probably appoint an alternate net control station. Alternate only operates at the discretion of the net control. In other words, it's ABC or AD4KA. Please act as net control. Make a net call for any stations that are not hearing this station. Over. He would come back, W4PXE, this is AD4KA, will go out. Then he makes his call. And he would report back. Now, a lot of those stations I may hear is things. Work those procedures out. It's a good idea to make sure that the alternate net control is maybe away from, especially on HF, is away from where your station is. You can hear them good readable. They very likely can read some of the stations you have weak readable or weak unreadable in a good readable or better. That's readable. If you're the net control, please give each station time to respond. One of the things that triggered us developing this training is on one of the state hurricane nets, they were going a roll call of the counties. I'll do a section of the counties. Manatee County, do you have any messages? Pasco County, do you have any messages? Pinellas County, do you have any messages? Polk County, do you have any messages? Went through the whole list of Florida counties in about 15 minutes, in about 5 minutes. If you've ever listened to SARNet on Wednesday, it takes about 2 hours to get through all the Florida counties. So, I think we have much better training happening now. As a net control, net operation is not like DX. We're not trying to get as many stations as possible in a short period of time. Don't go fast. Go steady, but speak clearly and concisely, so that stations understand you. If stations are asking net control to repeat things, or as we say in the military, say again, net control is not doing their job. Or we've got bad propagation, but be that as it may. Net control should always echo either the call sign or the name of the station, the handle of the station checking in. I always like to echo back in standard phonetics, especially if he gives me one of those cute calls. We've got one that does Norway to Echo Sugar Papa. And sometimes he uses another city for P. Okay? I would echo back to him, November 2, Echo Sierra Papa. We try to use the standard phonetics. They're much easier to understand, especially for those of us that have the clipboard bits in our back of our head. Whenever possible, ignore disruptions and interference. The person, and especially if it's QRM, the person doing that wants your reaction. They go away after they're ignored long enough. They'll go to somewhere else where they can have an impact. If you're getting a lot of interference, especially in an HF net, you may need to move to another frequency. All stations should listen to the NCS and follow instructions. If you're not following instructions, you probably didn't listen. Sorry. Okay, one of my pet peeves. And for other stations, only help the NCS if they ask for it. I had a couple of people on EagleNet for a few years that if I didn't immediately respond to a station, they would respond to that station. And it got very confusing after a short period of time. I keep chasing people out, I don't know why.